Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. In this video, I will continue my explanation in my last video about getting to know poetry, definition, function, types, and characteristic of poetry. Types and example of poetry. After getting to know the characteristic, you must know the types of poetry and example for study materials and knowledge about poetry. Of course, this is an important thing to understand more deeply about the poetry. First, romantic poetry. Romantic poetry is poetry that contains romance found in stories of Solace saga and folklore. This poem is used to display a long atmosphere, for example, regarding figure of speech, life, religion, love, friendship, and the like. The following is an example of romantic poetry. Second, Panji poetry. Panji poetry is a solage. The theme of this poem is a story of depiction and war. In this poem, there are elements of romance. The following is an example of a banner poem. Third, historical poetry. Historical poetry is a poetry based on historical event in the past. Most historical poetry contains war. The following is an example of a historical poem. 4. Figurative poetry. Figurative poetry is conveying a message in figurative form. This poem is often referred to as a poem about animals and flowers because its content is a satire or an allusion to an event. An example of figurative poetry is below. 5. Religious poetry. Religious poetry is very important poetry. There are several types of religious poetry, namely Sufi poetry, poetry about Islamic teaching, advice poetry, and historical poetry about the stories of the prophet. An example of this poem is as follows. Elements and function of poetry. The elements in poetry are divided into two, namely intrinsic element and extrinsic elements. First, intrinsic elements. Theme is the main idea the poet wants to convey through his poetry to every reader. Feelings are what the poet wants to expression in the form of his characteristic, point of view, character, and so on. Tone is the intonation or emphasis in the content of the poem, which can be mocking, admonishing, joking, happy, critical, compassionate, and so on. A message is a message or advice that the poet wants to convey to every reader. Second, extrinsic element. Background of the poet's life, poet's education, culture, and social background. Custom or habit of the local community. Poetry function. Participate in community arts and cultural activities. Poems can be used as songs or chants to accompany certain dances. Poems can be used as entertainment For example, they are sung at certain gathering and at wedding custom. The sonority of the voice or the softness of the tone of the poetry tries to disrupt feeling and ultimately leaves a deep impression. Poems are also used to convey teaching through stories and stories. Poetry is also a medium of information for the local environment. That is some broader information regarding the meaning, characteristic, function, types, and example of poetry. Hopefully, this video will inspire you to write literary works in the old poetry category. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.